When Karen built her pool on my land without permission, she triggered a property war that ended with me draining 30,000 gallons of water and bulldozing her concrete dream into rubble. By the time I was finished, Karen had lost her HOA presidency, faced criminal charges for forging county documents, and learned that some people won't be intimidated by threats and lawyers. I should have known something was wrong when I heard heavy machinery running at 7 in the morning. I'd been away for 3 days on a surveying job in Grand Junction, and I was looking forward to getting back to my quiet 5-acre property on the outskirts of Clearwater Bluffs. My land was undeveloped, just rolling hills with oak trees and a small creek running through the eastern boundary. I'd inherited it from my uncle 5 years ago and had been planning to build a house there eventually. The sound of diesel engines and hydraulic equipment wasn't what I expected to hear on my peaceful property. I drove up my gravel driveway and immediately saw the problem. Construction trucks were parked on my land, and a massive excavation was underway about 50 yards from the property line. Workers in hard hats were operating a backhoe, and there was a concrete truck idling nearby. I parked and walked toward the construction site, pulling out my phone to check the property boundary map I kept saved there. According to my GPS coordinates and the survey data, the excavation was definitely on my land. "Excuse me," I called out to the crew foreman. "What's going on here?" The foreman, a stocky man in his 50s wearing a Clearwater construction shirt, looked up from his clipboard. "Community pool project for the HOA. Should be finished by the end of the week." "This is my property," I said. "You're building on my land." The foreman frowned and pulled out his own paperwork. "I've got permits here showing this as HOA property. Community Center Development for Clearwater Bluff Subdivision." I looked at the papers he showed me. The project description mentioned a community pool and recreational area, but the property boundaries listed on the permit didn't match the actual surveyed boundaries of my land. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake," I said. "I'm a licensed surveyor, and I can tell you definitively that this excavation is on private property that doesn't belong to the HOA." The foreman looked uncomfortable. "Look, I just follow the permits and the property markers. If there's a boundary dispute, you'll need to take it up with the HOA. We're just the contractors." "Who authorized this project?" "Karen Redmond, HOA president. She's the one who signed off on everything." I thanked the foreman and walked back to my truck, my mind racing. I'd heard about Karen Redmond from neighbors. She was known for being aggressive about community improvements and had a reputation for steamrolling anyone who got in her way. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd decided to steal land from someone who understood property law better than most lawyers. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the Clearwater Bluffs HOA office, a converted house at the entrance to the subdivision. Karen Redmond was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-50s, perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and the kind of confident smile that suggested she was used to getting her way. "You must be Logan Price," she said before I could introduce myself. "I heard you were concerned about our community improvement project." "Concerned? Karen, your contractors are building a pool on my property without permission. That's not a community improvement. That's theft." Karen's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Price, I think there's been some confusion about the property boundaries. The land we're developing was unclaimed and had been unused for years. The county approved our project through proper channels." I pulled out my phone and showed her the official survey data. "This land isn't unclaimed. I own it, and I have the deed to prove it. Your pool is being built 15 feet onto my property." Karen glanced at the survey data dismissively. "Mr. Price, property boundaries can be complex, especially in rural areas. What matters is what the county has on file, and our permits are all in order." "Your permits are based on incorrect boundary information," I said. "The actual property line is here," I pointed to the map, "not where your contractors think it is." "Look," Karen said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone, "I understand you're upset about development near your property. Change can be difficult. But this community center will benefit everyone in the area, including you. Property values will increase, and you'll have access to beautiful recreational facilities." "I don't want access to facilities built on my stolen land," I said firmly. "I want the construction stopped immediately." Karen's facade finally cracked slightly. "Mr. Price, this project represents a significant investment by our community. We've already spent thousands of dollars on excavation and permits. Even if there are minor boundary discrepancies, surely we can work out some kind of arrangement." "The arrangement is simple," I said. "Get off my property." "That's not going to happen," Karen said, her voice turning cold. "This land was unused and effectively abandoned. You should have fenced it or posted signs if it mattered to you." I stared at her, amazed by her audacity. "Karen, do you understand that what you're describing is theft? You can't just take someone's land because it's not developed." "I can and I did," she said with a shrug. "Mr. Price, you seem like a reasonable man. I suggest you consult with a lawyer about your options. In the meantime, our construction will continue as scheduled." As I left the HOA office, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "You have 24 hours to stop trespassing near HOA property or face legal action. K. Redmond." I sat in my truck and laughed out loud. Karen Redmond had just threatened me with legal action for trespassing on my own land. She had no idea who she was dealing with. That evening, I spread out all my property documents on my kitchen table. Uncle Ray's original deed, the survey maps I'd updated when I inherited the property, tax records, and aerial photos showing the land boundaries. Everything confirmed what I already knew. The HOA was building their pool on my property. But Karen's threat had given me an idea. If she wanted to play legal games, I'd show her what real legal action looked like. The next morning, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing the Clearwater Bluffs HOA. It was a cease and desist order demanding that I stop harassing HOA contractors and interfering with lawfully permitted construction activities. The letter threatened me with a restraining order if I continued to trespass on HOA property or disrupt community improvement projects. I read the letter twice, marveling at the sheer audacity of it. Karen was actually trying to ban me from my own land. She just made this personal. At the county planning office, Clerk Ellie Grant revealed Karen's fraud immediately. "This application was rushed through in 3 weeks instead of months," she said, reviewing the permits. "The boundary descriptions don't match county records. According to this permit, the HOA owns land that belongs to Logan Price." "That's me," I said grimly. Ellie's eyes widened. "This is really not good." The permits showed property boundaries extending well beyond the HOA's actual limits, including my land without legal justification. The environmental assessment was signed by someone who'd never visited the site. "Someone either made a serious mistake or deliberately overlooked this," Ellie said. "If they're building on your land without permission, this is serious fraud." Back at my property, the crew was finishing the pool's concrete shell. I documented the exact encroachment, 15 feet at the deep end, covering 800 square feet of my land. I called my friend Dan Travers, a retired contractor. After explaining the situation, he laughed coldly. "In 40 years of construction, I've never seen anyone bold enough to steal land, then threaten the owner for complaining. If it were me, I've got a bulldozer that's been sitting idle too long." The next morning, I marked my property boundaries with professional survey markers and no trespassing signs. The markers clearly showed the pool's illegal encroachment. Karen arrived wearing workout clothes, carrying a pool towel. "This is harassment," she said. "You're trying to disrupt our grand opening this Saturday. You're planning a party on my land." "At our properly permitted community center," she insisted. I pointed out that even the utility lines crossed my property without permission. Karen's confidence faltered as she realized the scope of her illegal construction. Saturday morning, 40 people enjoyed Karen's pool party, all trespassing on my property. Karen smugly told me the community was grateful for the beautiful facility. "This is your last chance," I warned. "Remove the pool and we can settle quietly." Karen laughed loudly. "You're delusional if you think I'm destroying a beautiful facility over imaginary property claims." I photographed her standing next to my property marker with the pool visible behind her. "What are you doing? Documenting evidence for my lawsuit? You're going to sue us over some trivial boundary dispute? I'm going to sue you for trespass, conversion, fraud, and anything else my lawyer can think of. And Karen, I'm going to win." That evening, someone had torn down my property markers and replaced them with signs reading Property of Clearwater Bluffs HOA, Community Recreation Area. Karen had escalated from property theft to destruction of evidence and false signage. She'd just given me all the justification I needed to take this to the next level. Monday morning, I called Dan. "Remember what you said about your bulldozer?" "I was joking, Logan. Mostly. I'm not laughing anymore. She stole my land, forged documents, and destroyed evidence. I'm past the point of no return." "All right, then. I've got a D6 bulldozer and water pump system that could drain a pool in an hour. Just say the word, and I'll have equipment there in 2 hours." My lawyer, Jennifer, confirmed I had the right to remove unauthorized structures, but recommended getting a court order first. It would take a few weeks, maybe a month. I wasn't waiting a month while Karen continued stealing my land. Ellie revealed the corruption was worse than expected. 6 other projects approved for construction beyond property boundaries, all by the same county officials. There's a pattern of very fast approvals for projects that should have required extensive review. Tuesday morning, Karen escalated again. Someone had installed a fence that blocked my driveway access. The sheriff forced them to cut it open, calling it illegal obstruction. Karen confronted me angrily. "You're making yourself very unpopular in this community. I don't care about being popular. You're a thief who stole my land and forged documents." Her mask finally dropped. "You want to play hardball? Fine. You have no idea what you're up against." The HOA hired Preston and Associates, expensive lawyers who sent threatening letters and sued me for interfering with their theft of my land. They offered a settlement, $5,000 for $50,000 worth of stolen land. "You're more worried than you want to admit," I told Karen. I made 2 calls, Dan to bring equipment at dawn and reporter Janet Morrison about county permit fraud. Thursday morning, Dan arrived with the bulldozer and pump system. Janet brought a camera crew. When Karen saw the equipment, her face went pale. "What is that thing doing here?" "Land restoration equipment, in case the court decides unauthorized structures need removing." "You can't be serious. You'd destroy a beautiful community pool?" "I'd remove an illegal structure built on stolen land, yes." At the emergency hearing, Judge Coleman reviewed the evidence. Clear property boundaries, fraudulent permits, unauthorized construction. "The pool was built on land legally owned by Mr. Price without permission," she ruled. "Mr. C. Price has the absolute right to remove unauthorized structures from his land." Karen's face went white as the judge granted the injunction and ordered an investigation into the fraudulent permits. Outside the courthouse, Karen begged me to reconsider. "That pool cost over $200,000. You had multiple chances to do the right thing. You chose theft instead." Back at my property, Preston made desperate settlement offers. $100,000, then $200,000. When I refused, he threatened government retaliation. "Are you seriously threatening to abuse government power against someone protecting their property rights?" "I'm pointing out the realities of local politics. And I'm pointing out that threatening a federal witness is a felony. Janet, are you getting this on camera?" Preston went pale and backed away from the cameras. The news story devastated Karen. Janet's coverage showed clear evidence of fraudulent permits and Preston's threats about political retaliation, revealing Karen's deep connections to county corruption. My phone rang immediately. First call, FBI Special Agent David Chen wanted to discuss federal crimes related to county corruption. "Your case might be key to unraveling a much larger conspiracy. Don't destroy any evidence." Second call, State Attorney General's office opening an investigation into Jefferson County corruption. Third call, Karen, voice shaking. "Logan, you've destroyed me. The FBI is asking questions. The State Attorney General wants to investigate. My own HOA board is suing me. You destroyed your own life when you decided stealing was easier than following the law." FBI Agent Chen documented everything, explaining. They'd found corruption patterns in several Colorado counties. "Continue documenting everything. If there's organized corruption, you could be in danger." Ellie called urgently. Someone had tried to delete my property files remotely using high-level county access. This goes higher than just Karen. That evening, 2 county commissioners whose signatures were on Karen's permits visited me. "We want to assure you the county takes property rights seriously," Commissioner Williams said. "Your signatures are on permits for construction on land you knew I owned." Williams turned, threatening. We have ways of making life difficult for people who don't cooperate. You might face code violations and tax reassessments costing more than your property's worth. I started recording. Are you threatening retaliation for protecting my property rights? Within hours, FBI agents were interviewing both commissioners about their role in the fraud. The story exploded statewide. The governor announced a special investigation. Lawmakers called for federal oversight. Friday evening, someone installed a massive fence with razor wire around the pool, blocking access to my property. When I called the sheriff, Deputy Martinez said he'd been advised not to get involved by the county attorney's office. Someone with influence is protecting the HOA, he admitted. Saturday morning, Dan arrived with cutting tools. This has gone beyond property dispute. You're fighting organized corruption. As Dan cut the illegal fence, crowds gathered, including reporters from across the state. Karen arrived with Preston and private security. "You're destroying private property!" Preston shouted, waving a new restraining order protecting the pool. But the order only protected the pool itself, not the fence blocking my property access. Dan continued cutting until only the pool perimeter remained fenced. "This is contempt of court," Preston raged. "No, this is property ownership. The court protected the pool, not your right to block my land access." Janet's follow-up story revealed the restraining order judge was married to Commissioner Williams's sister. The corruption was deeper than anyone imagined. Sunday morning brought a call from Jennifer Walsh with news that changed everything. "Logan, I've been reviewing the restraining order more carefully. There's a serious problem with it." "What kind of problem?" "The judge who issued it has a conflict of interest that wasn't disclosed. If what the news reported is true about family connections to the county commissioners, this order could be invalid." "What does that mean for me?" "It means we can challenge the order and possibly get it overturned. But more importantly, it means you might have grounds for a federal civil rights lawsuit. If government officials are using the courts to protect their own corruption, that's a violation of your constitutional rights." Jennifer filed a motion to overturn the restraining order, citing judicial conflict of interest and lack of proper jurisdiction. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning, but Monday brought an unexpected development. I was reviewing survey maps in my home office when I heard vehicles approaching. Through my window, I saw 2 black SUVs pulling up to my house. FBI Special Agent Chen got out of the first vehicle, followed by 3 other agents. From the second SUV came 2 investigators from the Colorado Attorney General's office. "Mr. Price, we have warrants to search the Jefferson County Planning Office and the homes of several county officials," Agent Chen explained. "We wanted to let you know that this investigation has become much larger than your property dispute." "How much larger?" "We've identified at least 15 other properties where similar fraud occurred. The total value of illegally approved development exceeds $50 million. All involving Karen and the commissioners? Karen appears to have been a middle-level player in a much larger conspiracy. We're looking at developers, county officials, and possibly state legislators who've been involved in systematic corruption of the permitting process." Agent Chen handed me a business card. "Mr. Price, you're now a protected federal witness. If anyone threatens or attempts to intimidate you, call this number immediately." That afternoon, the news broke that FBI agents had raided the Jefferson County Courthouse and arrested 3 county officials, including both commissioners who'd threatened me. Karen's expensive lawyers immediately announced they were withdrawing from her case, citing irreconcilable differences with their client. By evening, Karen was representing herself, and she was desperate. She called me just after 9 p.m., crying. "Logan, please, I'll do anything. The FBI arrested my friends, my lawyers abandoned me, and the HOA board voted to sue me for fraud. I'm losing my house, my reputation, everything." "Karen, you did this to yourself. I know I made mistakes. But please, can't we work something out? I'll pay for pool removal, I'll resign from everything, I'll make a public apology. Just please don't let them destroy my life completely." "What about my life? What about the life you tried to destroy when you stole my land and threatened me?" "I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. But Logan, I have a daughter in college, a sick mother who depends on me. If I go to prison, they'll have nothing." For a moment, I felt something approaching sympathy for Karen. But then I remembered her arrogant smile when she'd told me that justice was what people with power decided it was. Karen, you should have thought about your family before you decided to become a criminal. Please, Logan, I'm begging you. What do you want? Money? An apology? I'll do anything. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. I want other people like you to see what happens when you think you're above the law. So you won't help me? The only help I'm willing to offer is advice. Get a good criminal lawyer and start cooperating with the FBI. Maybe if you help them uncover the rest of the corruption, they'll go easier on you. Tuesday morning's hearing was anticlimactic. Judge Miller had recused himself after his conflict of interest was exposed, and the new judge immediately overturned the restraining order. This court finds that the original order was issued without proper jurisdiction and in violation of judicial ethics, Judge Foster announced. Mr. Price's property rights are hereby restored in full. That afternoon, I stood on my property looking at Karen's pool, now legally mine to do with as I pleased. The water was still crystal clear, the expensive equipment was still humming, and there were still pool toys floating on the surface from the last time neighborhood kids had used it. I called Dan. Dan, it's time. Can you have the equipment here tomorrow morning? You sure about this, Logan? Once that pool is gone, there's no going back. I'm sure. Karen had every chance to do the right thing. She chose to steal, lie, and corrupt government officials instead. It's time to restore my land. I'll be there at dawn. That evening, I hand-delivered a letter to Karen's house. She answered the door looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Logan? This is a final notice, Karen. I'm removing the pool from my property tomorrow morning. If you have any personal property in the pool area, you have until midnight tonight to retrieve it. Karen's eyes filled with tears. You're really going to do it? Did you think I was bluffing? I hoped. I thought maybe you'd realize how much the community loved that pool, how much joy it brought to families. Karen, that pool was built on stolen land with forged permits. Any joy it brought was tainted by the fraud that created it. But the children, Logan, the neighborhood children who learned to swim there, who played there every day, doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked at her with something approaching pity. Those children are victims of your lies, just like I was. You made them love something that was never legitimate, never legal, never theirs to enjoy. So you're going to punish them for my mistakes? I'm going to restore stolen property to its rightful owner. If the children want a pool, the HOA can build one on land they actually own. Karen sagged against her doorframe. You know I'll probably go to prison for this. Yes, you probably will. And you're okay with that? Karen, you committed serious crimes. Prison is where criminals belong. As I walked back to my truck, Karen called out one last time. Logan, what if I had just asked permission? What if I had come to you 5 months ago and asked if we could build a community pool that extended onto your land? Would you have said yes? I stopped and turned back to look at her. You know what, Karen? If you had approached me honestly, shown me the plans, offered fair compensation, and treated me with respect, I probably would have said yes. I'm not opposed to community improvements that benefit families. Karen's face crumpled. So all of this destruction could have been avoided if I had just been honest? All of this destruction could have been avoided if you hadn't been a thief. I left Karen standing in her doorway, finally understanding the magnitude of what her greed and arrogance had cost her. I was awake before dawn, watching the sun come up over the hills while I waited for Dan to arrive. At exactly 6 a.m., I heard the rumble of diesel engines as his equipment convoy approached. Dan brought everything. The lowboy trailer with the bulldozer, a truck-mounted water pump capable of moving 3,000 gallons per minute, and 2 additional workers to help with the operation. Morning, Logan. You ready for this? I've been ready for months. As Dan's crew unloaded equipment, cars began arriving at the pool area. Word had spread through the neighborhood, and about 50 people gathered to watch what many of them saw as the destruction of their community center. Janet Morrison arrived with her camera crew, followed by reporters from 3 other stations. The story had captured statewide attention, and the demolition of Karen's illegal pool was being treated as a symbol of the fight against government corruption. At 7 a.m., I walked to the pool area and used surveyor's tape to mark off exactly where my property line ran. About 40% of the pool was on my land. the deep end, part of the deck area, and several pieces of expensive equipment. Karen arrived just as I finished marking the boundaries. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "Logan, please, one last time, I'm begging you to reconsider." "Karen, I gave you multiple chances to do the right thing. You chose to steal, lie, and threaten me instead." "But look at them," she gestured toward the crowd of neighbors. "Look at those children. You're destroying something they love." "I'm removing illegal structures from stolen land. If you hadn't built this pool through fraud, those children could have enjoyed it for decades." Preston arrived with two other lawyers, apparently having reconsidered his withdrawal from the case. "Mr. Price, my client is prepared to make a final settlement offer, $500,000 for an easement allowing the pool to remain." "Mr. Preston, your client is about to be indicted for federal crimes. She doesn't have $500,000, and I'm not interested in legitimizing theft through post hoc payments." "Then you're making a serious mistake. The bad publicity from this demolition will follow you for the rest of your life. The bad publicity will follow the criminals who built an illegal pool on stolen land. I'm just the property owner cleaning up their mess." At 8 a.m., I gave the signal to Dan. He started up the water pump and began connecting the discharge line to the pool's main drain. The pump was incredibly powerful. Within minutes, I could see the water level dropping visibly. The crowd's reaction was immediate and emotional. Some people were crying, some were angry, and some were taking photos and videos to post on social media. A woman with two young children approached me, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Price, please don't do this. My kids learned to swim in that pool. It's been their favorite place all summer." I felt a stab of genuine regret. These families weren't criminals. They were victims of Karen's fraud just as much as I was. "Ma'am, I'm sorry your children are caught in the middle of this, but Karen Redmond built this pool on stolen land using forged permits. If you're angry about losing it, your anger should be directed at her, not at me. But can't you just let it stay? Can't you work something out? Would you let a car thief keep your car because his kids enjoyed riding in it?" The woman walked away, still crying, and I felt like the villain in this story, even though I knew I was the victim. By 9 a.m., the pool was half empty. The expensive underwater lighting was exposed, along with the beautiful tile work that Karen had spent so much money on. That's when the sheriff's deputies arrived. Deputy Martinez approached me with what looked like another court order. "Mr. Price, I have an emergency injunction ordering you to stop all demolition activities." I looked at the document. It was signed by yet another judge and claimed that removing the pool would cause irreparable harm to the community and destroy property of significant value. "Deputy, this is the third different court order I've received about this pool. Who requested this injunction?" "The Jefferson County Attorney's Office on behalf of affected community members. The same county attorney's office whose bosses were arrested by the FBI yesterday?" Deputy Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Price, I just served the papers, but I have to advise you that violating this court order could result in arrest." I called Jennifer Walsh immediately. "Jennifer, they've got another court order. Can they keep doing this indefinitely?" "Let me see the document." "Logan, this order is signed by Judge Patterson, who's currently under investigation for taking bribes from developers. The Jefferson County court system is compromised. I'm going to file an emergency appeal with the federal court. How long will that take? A few hours, maybe less? But Logan, you should know that if you continue pumping water in violation of this order, you could be arrested." I looked at the pool, now 3/4 empty, then at Dan, who was waiting for instructions. "Jennifer, file the appeal. In the meantime, I'm going to exercise my constitutional right to protect my property." I gave Dan the signal to continue pumping. Deputy Martinez shook his head. "Mr. Price, I'm going to have to arrest you if you don't comply with the court order." "Deputy, that court order was issued by a corrupt judge to protect an illegal structure built on stolen land. I'm not stopping." For a tense moment, it looked like Deputy Martinez was going to arrest me. But then his radio crackled with a message from the sheriff. He listened, then walked away to make a phone call. When he returned, he looked relieved. "Mr. Price, the sheriff has advised me not to enforce this court order pending review by federal authorities. You can continue your activities." By 10 a.m., the pool was completely drained. The beautiful blue water was gone, leaving only a concrete shell filled with debris, leaves, and the skeletal remains of pool equipment. Karen stood at the edge of her former pool, staring into the empty concrete crater. "It's really gone," she said quietly. "The water is gone," I corrected. "The theft is about to be gone too." I climbed into Dan's bulldozer and started the engine. The crowd fell silent as I positioned the machine at the edge of the pool. "Logan, wait!" Karen screamed. "Please, just wait!" I paused the bulldozer and looked at her. "What if I confess? What if I plead guilty to everything and cooperate fully with the FBI? Would that change anything? It might help you get a lighter sentence, Karen, but it won't save your stolen pool. Then there's nothing I can do to stop this? You could have stopped it 5 months ago by not stealing my land. You could have stopped it 4 months ago by removing the pool when I first complained. You could have stopped it 3 months ago by accepting responsibility instead of threatening me." I looked around at the crowd of neighbors, many of whom were crying or looked devastated. "Karen, look at these people. Look at what your greed and dishonesty have cost them. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from every family who invested emotionally in something that was never legitimately theirs." Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I know I destroyed everything. I engaged the bulldozer's hydraulics and lowered the blade. The concrete cracked like thunder. Karen's expensive pool, which had cost over $200,000 and had been the pride of the Clearwater Bluffs community, took exactly 47 minutes to reduce to a pile of broken concrete and twisted metal. I was methodical about it. I demolished only the portions that were on my property, leaving the rest of the pool intact on HOA land. The result was a bizarre half pool that looked like it had been cut in half by a giant knife. The crowd watched in stunned silence as I used the bulldozer to push the debris into a neat pile at the edge of my property line. When I was finished, I climbed down from the machine and surveyed my work. My land was restored. The theft was ended. Justice was served. But I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for the families who had lost something they loved because of Karen's crimes. Janet Morrison approached me with her camera crew. "Logan, how do you feel about what you've just done?" "I feel like justice has been served. Karen Redmond stole my land and built an illegal structure on it. Today, that structure was removed and my property was restored." "What about the families who lost their community pool?" "Those families are victims of Karen's fraud, just like I was. If they want justice, they should sue Karen for lying to them about owning the land." "Any regrets about destroying something the community loved?" "I regret that Karen's crimes made this necessary, but I don't regret protecting my property rights." Preston approached me as the camera crew moved away. "Mr. Price, I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed a beautiful community asset and traumatized dozens of families." "Mr. Preston, your client stole land and forged government documents. If families are traumatized, it's because they trusted a criminal. This isn't over. My client will be appealing the property determination and seeking damages for the destruction of valuable improvements. Your client will be lucky if she avoids federal prison. I suggest she focus on that instead of filing frivolous lawsuits." As the crowd dispersed, several neighbors approached me. Some were angry, but others were apologetic. An elderly man named George Henderson shook my hand. "Mr. Price, I owe you an apology. When this started, I thought you were just being difficult about sharing land. I understand now that Karen lied to all of us." "Thank you, George. I know this has been hard on everyone. What Karen did was wrong, but what's really upsetting is that she made us all complicit in it. We enjoyed that pool thinking it was legitimate, not knowing we were enjoying the fruits of theft." George's comment captured something important. Karen hadn't just stolen from me. She'd stolen the moral peace of mind of every neighbor who had unknowingly participated in enjoying stolen property. That afternoon, I received a call from Agent Chen. "Mr. Price, we wanted to update you on the investigation. Karen Redmond has agreed to plead guilty to multiple federal charges in exchange for cooperation with our investigation of the broader corruption network." "What charges is she facing?" "Fraud, conspiracy, bribery of public officials, and forging federal documents. She's looking at 5 to 8 years in federal prison." "And the county officials?" "Commissioners Williams and Davis have been indicted on corruption charges. Judge Miller is under investigation for judicial misconduct. We're also looking at several state legislators who may have been involved. The scope of the corruption was staggering. What had started as a simple property dispute had exposed a criminal network that reached into the highest levels of county and state government. 3 days later, I was standing in my restored property, planning where to plant native trees to replace the grass that had been destroyed during the pool construction. Dan approached, carrying a manila envelope. "Logan, this came for you at my shop. Looks official." It was a bill from the Clearwater Bluffs HOA for $47,000, itemized as follows: pool construction costs, $200,000, legal fees, $25,000, property damage from demolition, $15,000 community impact assessment, $5,000 administrative costs, $2,000 total amount owed by Logan Price for destruction of community property, $247,000. I started laughing and couldn't stop. "What's so funny?" Dan asked. "Karen is billing me for the cost of the pool she stole my land to build." "You're kidding!" "She wants me to pay her for destroying an illegal structure built on my own property with forged permits." Dan shook his head in amazement. "That woman has balls the size of bowling balls. She's also about to learn what happens when you send fraudulent bills to federal witnesses." I called Agent Chen and faxed him a copy of the bill. 20 minutes later, he called back. "Mr. Price, this could be considered extortion and intimidation of a federal witness. We'll be adding it to the charges against Mrs. Redmond." That evening, I received one final call from Karen. "Logan, I heard they're adding more charges because of the bill the HOA sent you." "Karen, you tried to make me pay for destroying an illegal structure built on my stolen land. What did you expect?" "I didn't send that bill. The HOA board sent it after they voted to sue you for damages. Then the HOA board is about to learn they can't sue someone for removing illegal structures from their own property." "Logan, I'm going to prison, probably for a long time. Before I go, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for stealing your land, for lying to my neighbors, for corrupting government officials. I'm sorry for everything." "Karen, why? Why didn't you just ask permission? Why didn't you build the pool on land you actually owned?" There was a long pause. "Because I wanted to build the biggest, most beautiful pool in the county. The HOA land wasn't big enough for what I envisioned. Your land had the perfect spot, level ground, good drainage, beautiful views. So you stole it. I convinced myself that it was unused land that wasn't hurting anyone. I told myself that you'd probably never even notice. And when you did notice, I thought I could intimidate you into accepting it. You thought wrong. I know. I know I was wrong about everything. I destroyed my life, my family's life, and the lives of my neighbors because I was too arrogant to ask permission for something you might have agreed to." Karen was crying now. "The worst part is that my daughter won't speak to me. She's embarrassed to have a criminal for a mother. I ruined everything because I wanted a bigger pool." 6 months later, I was sitting on a bench I'd installed overlooking the restored area where Karen's pool used to be. Native oak trees were growing where the concrete had been, and wildflowers had begun to bloom in the former deck area. The Clearwater Bluffs HOA had built a new, smaller pool on land they actually owned. It wasn't as grand as Karen's stolen pool, but it was legitimate, and families could enjoy it without the moral compromise of benefiting from theft. Karen had been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison after her cooperation helped convict 8 other defendants in the corruption scheme. The county had paid over $2 million in settlements to victims of the fraudulent permitting scheme. Most importantly, new oversight procedures had been implemented to prevent developers from getting permits for projects on land they didn't own. My phone rang. It was George Henderson, the neighbor who had apologized to me after the demolition. "Logan, I wanted to let you know that the new HOA board has voted to name the new pool area the Henderson Family Aquatic Center in honor of my wife who passed away last year." "That's wonderful, George. But more importantly, we've voted to install a plaque acknowledging what happened with the old pool. We want people to remember that community improvements built on lies and theft aren't really improvements at all." What does the plaque say? It says, "This facility was built on legitimately owned land through honest processes and transparent governance." It stands as a reminder that true community assets must be built on a foundation of integrity, not deception. As I hung up the phone, I thought about Karen's question from that final call. Would I have agreed to let them build a pool on my land if she had asked permission? Probably. If she had approached me honestly, shown me the plans, offered fair compensation, and treated me with respect, I likely would have said yes to a community improvement that benefited local families. Instead, her arrogance and criminality had cost her everything. Her freedom, her reputation, her family relationships, and ultimately the very pool she had been so desperate to build. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My property was peaceful again, restored to the natural beauty that had drawn my uncle to buy it decades ago. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of children playing at the new, legitimate pool, laughter that wasn't tainted by theft, joy that wasn't built on lies. I stood up from the bench and walked toward my truck, satisfied that justice had been served and that future generations would inherit a community built on honesty rather than corruption. Next time, Karen, build your own damn pool.